there, welcome to Leading Change Conversations, the podcast where we tackle real-life challenges with leaders like you to make organizational change a breeze. In this episode, we will explore how to build a company where people are attracted by its mission and how to connect company growth objectives to personal growth. I am Ulrike and I train, coach, and inspire leaders to turn into successful change agents, to communicate with impact, and to lead with authenticity. So today, let me introduce you to our amazing guest, Knut Karlsen. Knut is co-founder, chief growth officer, and chair of Atlas Agro, a company that aims to decarbonize nitrogen fertilizer production. In 2023, Atlas Agro received the largest financing round of any Swiss company. Knut has worked as a consultant and business leader worldwide, including as a partner at PwC, president of Yara in Brazil, and CEO of Imo BioNG. He's Norwegian and moved to Switzerland last year after 10 years in Brazil. Welcome, Knut.
Thank you, Ulrike. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure to speak to you. So when we speak about change, we often think immediately about things that we are tearing down, because we leave something, some old habits, old methods, or what have you, instead of focusing more on what we are actually building up. You are now currently in a phase where you are building up a business that has a very strong purpose. And what I would like to see with you today is really, what are these beautiful effects that you have when you have this opportunity, because that is a very special opportunity. What would you say are some of these very first aspects we can dig deeper into afterwards?
Yeah, thank you. It's a very good question. It's a very interesting topic to explore. And my background has frequently focused on, you call it tearing down, at least tearing down parts of the organization to build something from new. And a lot of leadership literature is also focused on that. A lot of the acronyms and the talk about change as a burning platform and similar things are frequently based on, the idea and the concept that we need to have something to run away from, something to fear. And what we're trying to do now is something very different. We're building a company from scratch, as you said, Ulrike. It presents some very interesting opportunities. And we, Petter, my co-founder, and I, when we established this company almost 3 years ago, we obviously had big plans that we still have to build a big company. But it's a bit more than that, and it has certain aspects that I think are core to how we build a company. And one thing is the external one. It's about making a small dent in the universe. And we really mean that, because we're trying to decarbonize an industry that is responsible for almost 2% of the world's CO2 emissions. That's quite a lot. That's a lot. I think I read an article in Financial Times that 500,000 people die annually due to pollution from burning coal for energy, while there are other sources. So the external motivation is important, making actually a change. And in addition to that, we try to make an internal motivation and in terms of building a company where people can thrive working. So one thing is working with something very intriguing and motivating from an external perspective, like being able to participate in changing something that needs to be changed. And another thing is, and perhaps the more difficult part, is how to create an internal working environment where you look forward to go to work today, do it every day, almost every day at least, not just because you are participating in bringing about change, but because you actually like to work there, because people treat you well, because you have interesting and challenging tasks, because your colleagues, you like to work with your colleagues. And that is a unique opportunity when you start from scratch, because we select the people that can work here. Now that we are approaching almost 30 people, of course, we don't interview everybody individually through all its phases, but we still participate as founders in the hiring of every employee.
Yeah, it's a unique opportunity to shape a company culture from scratch, because you bring the right people in. Usually when we want a company culture, we need to modify, or as often as
Yes,
people need to modify their behavior, their way of thinking, that they fit to that culture, whereas
yes,
you can bring those in who actually do fit to the culture already.
yes.
And by bringing them in, you shape that culture piece by piece. That sounds really interesting. I mean, it's a bit like a human puzzle that you're pulling together. How does that?
That's right. That's right. And there is only ourselves to blame, you know. If the culture doesn't develop as it in a positive way, then in the end, that's us two founders that haven't done our job properly because we haven't managed to hire the right people and encourage the people to work in a way we would very much like to see a company develop. So it also brings a high degree of responsibility and accountability. We can't now come in here like I could do in the past and say, this is the problem of last management. There is no previous management. There is only us.
Nobody else to blame, yeah?
Nobody to blame.
How does your previous experience come into play here? Because you have worked in different, also very big organizations. And
Mm,
we all know that in big organizations, it's not like that because the sheer number of people and all the cascading down and
mm,
many things get lost in different areas of an organization, especially
mm,
also when it comes to culture, because it all
mm,
depends on each single leader, how they manage their teams. And
mm.
what is that learning? What did you take away from these big organizations as good or bad, both, that you now bring into this startup?
Well, good question. I think one thing I've recognized perhaps even more strongly now, it was very easy to blame the large organizations. So they're dysfunctional, they're bureaucratic. If it was my company, it would have been different. But no, now you see bureaucracy starts creeping in here as well. It is difficult to build a company, and there are good reasons why large companies often appear dysfunctional. What have I learned from the bring companies that I could bring here? I think the importance of having a very, very clear strategy. I think the companies I've worked for, I've seen those who succeed are the ones who really have a very strong and clear strategy. And to me, that's not just big goals. That means actually having thought through the big issues that need to be solved and made sure to align all the resources and internal policies towards those objectives.
Mhm.
And I think I believe when we now grow as a small company, but we grow fast, keeping that focus is extremely important because it's so easily to be diverted to other tasks. And when you don't have this big machine behind you, like a big company sometimes so frequently would have, you tend to lose direction very quickly. So I do believe very strongly in that successful large companies and successful small companies, they need to be very, very clear on what they want to achieve and how to allocate the resources in order to achieve that.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. When I'm looking back, I worked in the same industry like you for a few years. And by that time, the company I worked for had an extremely strong mission and purpose.
Mm,
Very, very strong company culture
mm,
and very amazing. Also, I worked very much on a global level. If I went to Brazil, to Japan, or to Germany, it was always immediately recognizable that we are in the same company, not because
yes,
the quote was on the wall where it had the same design, but there was a feeling. There was this feel of something is, we have that thing in common. And
yes,
I think you can, with any business, have a very strong purpose.
yes,
And many companies just don't make that effort to install that purpose. Because when the purpose is there and people really believe in it, they believe that they contribute to something bigger, like you do now with your startup, where it is very obvious, that it's something really big. But sometimes it's not that obvious for companies to find a purpose that is really important. But if a company has a compelling purpose, people do very much or much, much more. They go this famous extra mile. Yeah, they will go beyond with their ideas and with all the initiatives they take. I've seen that happening there. And I was really surprised that it was like that because from
yes,
an outside perspective, I would never have thought that people embrace so much what their company was doing. And when people do that, it's a huge, huge difference. And we had many difficulties, a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, but people systematically went that extra mile in all levels. And I found that very, very surprising. And company cultures live and die,
Yes.
and I think you will see that coming up as well.
Yes.
Obviously, there was a strong phase of company culture. Today, this company is not at all in that same strong cultural space anymore. And the whole performance went drastically down, actually.
Yeah.
So I can imagine in your case now, you have 27 people, it will be 30 or something like that. And
Yeah.
there will be a critical point, and probably you're already approaching it somehow, where you do not have this possibility anymore to know everybody very well, where you will not have the possibility to hire everybody or to at least have one discussion, one interview with that person at least. And then then it becomes difficult. Do you have a plan already how you will make sure, things continue to then be cascaded down properly to maintain this strong adherence to the purpose on one side, but also this, like you say, that joy at work, that the way how people are treated, because that's very important. And often it's empty words in big organizations.
Oh yes, and it's small as well.
What's your plan, to make it happen, to keep it real?
Yeah, I think what you mentioned about culture is so important. I think wasn't it Peter Drucker who said many years ago that culture eats strategy for breakfast? And I think that stayed with me because it is so true. And the example you made from your experience with this company where there was a strong culture and then it sort of lost that, and that it had consequences not just beyond the daily working, but the actual strategy and the success and results of the company. So how would we try to do it here? Well, we've been thinking a lot about it, and it's funny. Just when after the first hire, it started getting a little bit difficult because we hire smart people. We have very good people, and they're good. Not only technical, they're good in having their ideas and their concepts of what constitutes good organizations, good leadership, and often there are many ways to have a good culture, and we don't have all the answers. I surely don't have. So you sort of have to also accept that some people come in that sees this differently, and they take maybe the culture in a slightly different way, and that's natural and it's good. I think the thing is to keep it within, or at least to do our best to keep it within the spirit of what we want to achieve, and not necessarily all the details. Mm-hmm. It is very important for us to care for our people. We're not always successful, and I've seen examples personally in this company just with with 20-ish employees that we're not always successful with it when we fail. But at least we have to learn from it. At least we have to try to get back always to these core principles of what we want to achieve. And then the nuances, the colors of it can be different, and it can be different in our Brazilian entity and our Spanish entity and the US entity. But I believe it's extremely important to have a set of very core principles that we live and die by. And if we fail, and we will fail, at least we come back to them and we work on them again. And then we have to accept that people are different, and it should be different, and it should be a diverse organization. And it shouldn't be exactly like we envisioned it. It will never be. And that's okay, as long as we have the core principles in place.
Mm-hmm. Did you already shape, a mission or a vision or values, the usual suspects, or did you do anything else to put this culture into words?
Yes, we do. And the funny thing is, even there, we sort of have nuances that we are not necessarily 100% aligned on. But we are aligned on the very principle. One is, of course, we have a mission to decarbonize our industry. That is non-negotiable. We're not going into suddenly start producing fossil fertilizers. That's non-negotiable. We do have a principle that we really want to take care of our people. And taking care of our people doesn't mean that we always should be nice and cozy, but it means that we do our best to realize and help cultivating the emotional side of ourselves as well. I don't believe leadership can necessarily be, distilled into a set of few mechanistic principles that you can just say, here is how we do it in this organization. It's about how we choose to listen and to work together with our employees to help them shape it and create a safe space where they can come back to us and say, hey, this doesn't really work. How can we change this? So we do have a mission. We do have a vision. We have communicated it. We maybe should give you a reminder, actually. We should probably come back to it and stress it again. Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, I think it's important because obviously, as you're a startup, it might evolve a bit. But from the nature of your business, probably not so much because the core is very clear. So
Yeah.
I think it is something that is very sustainable. It will only change maybe in nuances, like you say, where you might not fully agree or where the growth of the company will make a little difference to it potentially. But I think it's super important because it's such an opportunity that people who are in embrace that, because when new people come in, obviously they will carry them with them. And they will feel this spirit and they will,
Yes.
wow, people are really amazed by what they're doing. So they get amazed as well. I mean, it's contagious, this positive energy.
Yes.
Maintaining that is a great thing. Yeah, congratulations for that.
Well, congratulations for trying, I suppose, and for we believe we are reasonably successful. But I also see it as it's not always easy, and it needs to be continuously nurtured. And it's especially it's a responsibility to us, the founders, and to the management team to work on this every day, to live the principles. Yeah, we do our best, and we need to continue being even better.
Mhm. Let me come to the other area, which we spoke to a little bit in the beginning, and you mentioned something about this as well. When it comes to, there's the organizational growth and people buying into this, buying into the purpose, the mission, and
Yeah.
all that. So that's one point. But the other side is, how can people have really fun at work? How can they really find their personal growth story or outlook in the organizational growth story, which is often difficult for people. And most of the time, people actually run in a hamster wheel and they don't look left and right and have no time for such things.
Yes.
They just feel, I like my job or I don't like my job. But otherwise, it's all like we're just running, and postpone to later to think maybe
Sure.
about it and step back a bit. Do you have the feeling, or how do you help people to stay more clear on what they really want, how they can grow in the company, and how they can connect this also to the company growth, this personal and company growth connection? How do you help them to do that?
That's a very interesting question. I can really appreciate what you're saying there, people, and it's so true. People, whenever it's a motivating and challenging target, people work a lot. And when you hire really good people, that I believe we've been very successful in doing, these people, they work very, very hard because they're intrinsically motivated and they're really good in what they do. And we're right now at the stage, and I've been discussing this with the management team, that where we've lost a little bit of that fun part because we work too much.
Mhm.
And partly it's because of the real world issues, that there is a budget that you need to adhere to, and that budget has certain number of resources in them. And it's not unlimited how many people you can put in. And right now we are at this very challenging point in time where we say, either we need to stop doing some things, or we need to have more people, because otherwise we'll break the teams. I mean, they work massive hours, and it's not sustainable. It can work for a couple of months, but then the fun goes out of it. It's not you. Doesn't matter how much you love your work, if you can't see your family, if you don't have time to take properly care of yourselves, you don't get enough sleep, so you come to work and you're angry and annoyed and a little bit, not in your top shape, then work is not fun. So we need to have this balance. And I think, as you said, first there needs to be a balance in place so people work with very interesting tasks. And the best way to do that is to hire people for roles that are slightly vague so they can help shape the role themselves. And since we're now working with quite challenging technical and commercial tasks, the people we have had the opportunity to recruit have this vision and this genuine interest in shaping their role. So that brings the fun to it. They can, at least partly, I hope, do work which I find genuinely interesting. And then we need to give them that space to have sufficient time to spend with their family, to relax, to do whatever they want to do on a personal side, and to get enough sleep, so they come mentally ready to work and can thereby appreciate interaction with other people and appreciate the fun possibility of the work. Because if you sleep 4 hours a week, 4 hours a day, 4 hours a night, it doesn't matter how interesting your task work, it's going to be a drudge after a while because you mentally can't cope with it. So I think those are the two aspects: being able to shape the role yourself, at least partly, and having this surplus of energy when you come to work, because your task is just enough to keep you really motivated, but not too much to pull you down.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's very good insight. Even it seems to be an obvious one, but we see that so often. People are really overworked, nearly everywhere. And it's just a feeling, because probably it's just a feeling because we've exploded already. But we have the feeling it's more and more and more all the time. And it's always just getting more. And this already for 10 or 15 or 20 years. And it's like really, really feels like a crazy, crazy rhythm of work, actually. And like you say, in such a small organization, I think it's extremely important to maintain that balance. Because yes, people would work over hours and do a lot, but it needs to be, to a certain extent, limited in time. Yeah. I remember my very first role, it was a big organization of 70,000 people. It was in the automotive industry, but we were building actually the safety frame, the metal frame of the smart car in 1996.
Interesting.
Yes. And that was a little team of 15 people working in the cellar of a huge building somewhere near a big Mercedes plant. But we were only 15 people from more or less across the globe, building up the very first production site that was ever built by this huge group, actually, in France. And so it felt like a startup, even though it was not a huge organization, but we had exactly that feeling. And I remember that we were all working like crazy. I mean, really, and we loved it. Yeah. So even Saturdays, I was driving down to France, doing interviews with people and coming back, and no problem with the fact that I was working 7 hours a week in that time, and no worries, yeah. And at some point, I think things become more routine oriented, not so crazy, a little less of building up, a bit more of now running the business, and then things have to change. Whereas I think that's a critical point, because often then people are so much in the speed rhythm.
Yes.
And also the senior management used to have this speed rhythm, and people are always available. It's really hard to say, okay, but now we are actually starting to run something instead of just building up something. We should now deliberately take the time to a bit slow down and make this the new routine. And I think this step is often missed. It's just not happening. And then it's just accelerating more and more and more and more until people get frustrated, tired, worst case burnout, obviously. But you lose that whole great energy that you had at the start if you don't find that moment where you need to shift to something more, well, moderate, let's say.
I think that's very true. And that will inevitably happen, that people burn out if they work like that. It's not healthy. And sometimes we as top managers, we need to be very careful of that and make sure that there is enough resources, and that we also limit the tasks to what can be accomplished. So sometimes our biggest job as leaders is to get out of the way so people can do their job and not load a lot of other things on them. So and like you said, you can work on this for a few months, maybe a few years, but I would really like our employees to be here in 30 years. And then the people we hire for, hopefully they will stay with us, until they retire. And then you need to have that long-term perspective by delivering on the short-term targets.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a really good trick. It's not a trick. It's a real strategy on how to run a startup. What you just said is interesting, is to say we try to establish a long-term strategy, long-term career potential or career outlook with something that is just building up, that's totally fresh, that is still in the phase, whereas a lot of unknown that is coming up for us, and a lot of growth probably, sometimes massive, sometimes not, which is always huge change also in the ways how people have to work and how those who are managing then, I don't know, a new team, one day you might open a production plant. It's huge change that is coming up at some point. And that people then are just always in the position to be able to embrace this new change and maintain the spirit from the beginning.
Yes. Yeah, that's what we really would like to see happen. Absolutely. And we have a very clear policy, and I think it's getting 10 years ago, it was 20 years ago, it is Jack Welch's things that you should take out the bottom 10 or 20% every year, and sort of that very structured approach. It's really something we do not believe in. We do not want to take up 20% or 10% or ideally anybody. We really rather want to have a place for people to grow. And if for some reason we hire somebody who doesn't have a fit, we need to help them move on. But the objective is to keep people here for the long term, and then you need to make it sustainable day to day.
Yeah.
There is no other way.
Yeah, exactly. How are you dealing, my last question, how are you dealing with it personally? So question, I mean, you came from bigger organization, you have decided to get into the startup project
Yes,
with all your heart, I can imagine, all your conviction, which is great. But
absolutely.
you certainly also have downsides sometimes where you think, oh, maybe this is not
Yeah.
like it should be, or I don't know.
Yeah.
How are you handling it? I mean, it's a journey. How did you handle? You can also speak about how it was right in the beginning, for example.
Yeah.
You had a lot of doubts at the same time,
Well,
convictions
yeah,
and doubts. How did you handle that?
that's a good question. Sometimes it is a bit of a roller coaster. Sometimes, some days I think, this is going to be the biggest thing ever. We're going to be bigger than Tesla. Nobody can stop us. This is going to be fantastic. And other days you keep thinking, there's no way this is going to work. The second part, there's no way this is going to work, luckily happened less and less frequently. And I think in a way, having had the experience in working with troubled companies like I have given me a reason to believe, because I've seen it can get really, really bad, but still we managed to move through. Still we managed to get this through. And what we have here is really nothing compared in terms of difficulties, nothing compared to, or despair. I wouldn't say difficulties. Challenging technical difficulties are huge, of course, but there is nothing like the despair, at least for me, that I've had in previous roles where it was really, really dark. It's not like that here. But we do have upsides and downsides. I just realized it's almost 30 years since I left university, 30. And having that experience and seeing that, a lot of dark days, you get through them. And there is, I think that helps me personally. It gives me a comfort. It gives me a platform that I know that it's going to work. There's going to be tough days, but it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And then you get quite far in the end. It has to be really, really dark before the light switches off. And yeah, it takes much more than where we are now, that's for sure.
Yeah, thank you, Knut, for sharing this insight, also this very personal one. And I think it needs a special type of character as well to manage these kind of situations. Some of us are very, how to say, we want results very, very quickly and immediately, and are very, very impatient. And then obviously such a situation is very hard to manage, because if you blame yourself for each and every single moment when you make a step back, it becomes really painful, actually.
Yeah.
But if you're able to look to the bigger picture and say, okay, 1 step back, but 2 steps forward, I still move on, and that's totally fine. And I accept this fully. And maybe in a step back, I have so many great learnings that actually it's not even a real step back. It's a growth step, the step
That's
back.
right. That's right. And I mean, that's a good one. And that's maybe hard to appreciate in a moment, but if you take some time to reflect on it and appreciate it, you do learn quite a lot from these small steps back, and even the big steps back. And I remember from when we were in the worst difficulties in my previous company, that we also managed to pull through, and it's going really well now. There's a Brazilian expression in Portuguese. It's called sangue de barata, and it means basically the cockroach blood, the blood of the cockroach, because the cockroach survives anything. So you need to have cockroach blood in your veins, because then you'll survive the nuclear bomb. You don't just have to take it easy, take it a little bit, chilled out, and just move on, persistently, just move on. And then you'll get there.
Fantastic last word, Knut.
Bringing up the cockroach at the end of the story.
Exactly.
Podcast. Not sure how good that was, but it's a saying that has stayed with me. I really like it.
Yeah, it's a great metaphor, and I think it's a philosophy of life that we can all learn from and just take a bit of it for ourselves.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and thanks for tuning into Leading Change Conversations today. So if you want to improve your own skills on leading change or communicating more effectively, check out my courses for individuals on my website. I have quite a few useful courses of just 90 minutes around overcoming procrastination, surmounting change resistance, communicating with impact, or influencing through presence. So until next time, keep leading, keep learning, and making a difference.